Hey, we're Diane and Sam. For the last 4 years, we have been homesteading on our rural property on the south coast of New South Wales. In that time, we learnt to raise chickens, meat birds, geese, sheep, pigs, and even bees, and we grew our own food organically in our gardens. We learnt so much in that 4 years and we can't wait to get back into it. But at the moment, if you haven't noticed, we converted a school bus into our tiny home and we've been traveling around Victoria visiting other people's homesteads. And it's kind of brought us back to the situation where we don't quite feel like we're homesteading anymore, and yet there's a lot of skills and things that we do naturally on a day-to-day basis that pretty much is homesteading. So in today's video, I want to go over 10 skills that you can start doing right now to homestead, to learn to homestead, so that you don't have to wait for your dreamland or to raise those animals and gardens in the future. You can start doing things right now. You might be surprised, but there are a lot more of us that are homesteaders than you realize. Now in this video specifically, I am focusing on skills, practical things that you can be doing. So the first basic skill that I'm going to cover is how to use basic tools. Things like screwdrivers, hammers, sewing machines. All of these tools are going to be so handy to you when you start to build things on your homestead. And there's no reason to wait till later to use them now. I'm sure there's plenty of DIY projects or repairs that you can make in your rentals or homes right now, even taking on projects like little crafts and things that you can build for your pets. When I first started out, I built the worst box ever to store my dog food in. It lasted us a very long time and eventually stored our chicken food in it, but it wasn't very sturdy at all. But you know what? That's not a mistake, that's not a problem, that's the beginning. We all start somewhere, and learning those basic tools is going to go a long way. Right now I can say that I'm pretty confident using a jigsaw and other more heavy-duty tools like drop saws, and that all comes because I learned early on and then improved as I went. So learning those basic tools is not going to do you any harm. The next skill that you can learn is to create your own beauty and cleaning products. A lot of the products out there on the market have a huge list of ingredients, and most of those ingredients you can't pronounce and you probably don't know the origins of. So the more that you can start making at home yourself, the better. Beauty products I haven't delved into too much, other than making some salve, which is like a moisturizer for your skin, which we absolutely swear by. But cleaning products are super simple to make. Things like vinegar spray to disinfect your space, things like laundry detergent, and even dishwashing tablets. These are all recipes that you can easily find on Pinterest, on YouTube, in books, so there's no excuse to not give them a go. And honestly, they're a really fun DIY project to do on the weekend and a great way to upskill yourself and learn before the homestead. The next skill seems to be like a new skill, but is actually one of the oldest skills that humans have been practicing, and that's the skill of fermenting. Back in the day, people used to ferment to actually preserve their food because they didn't have access to fridges and freezers like we do now. We have fridges and freezers and we can use them to our advantage, but there's absolutely nothing better than a fermented pickle or fermented sriracha or sauerkraut, kimchi. The list honestly goes on with all the delicious things that you can make. And fermented food with its acidic flavor base is such a powerhouse in your cooking and will transform the flavors of the meals you make without a doubt. So if you haven't fermented yet, or if you need an excuse to get back into it, cabbage is officially in season, so go get yourself a cabbage and make some kimchi. The beautiful thing about fermented food as well is that it actually stores a lot longer, and you don't need to water bath can it. In fact, that actually kills the bacteria that you're trying to create from ferments. So remember, by fermenting your food, it's going to last a lot longer, and you're not going to have to get any fancy equipment that can be really terrifying to someone that's new to it. The art of bread making is the next skill. Bread can often seem really intimidating to someone starting out for the first time, and I get it. Trying to knead bread for the first time or mix a sourdough when you've never done it before and it's all sticky and going everywhere is really daunting. So don't start with the difficult bread recipes. Stick to your flatbreads that are really quick to bring together. Pita bread and tortillas are one of the easiest recipes that I have in my book, and they are my favorite to make on a regular basis. You can keep them in the fridge in a zip-tight bag. You can keep them in the freezer and reheat them really easily. They're so versatile for what you can make with them. And then when you're ready, you can start to upgrade to the skills of learning to make your own sourdough or your own yeast bread. There's so many different types of breads out there, and by making it, you're going to feel instantly connected to the future that you're hoping to create for yourself on the homestead. Oh, and not to mention that keeping your sourdough starter alive or keeping a bread culture alive is a great way to look after something that is living but doesn't have consequences if it dies. If you're hoping to keep animals in the future, it might be good practice to do that now. I think the biggest trap that keeps us in our place in the cities or in the suburbs is our need to consume. This is the need to always be surrounded by things and wanting to buy the next new toy, gadget, or thing that comes out. So the next skill that is good to practice is to consume less. We moved out to a rural property, and one of the first things we noticed is that a lot of the things we would normally easily get in the shops were no longer accessible to us. And so what did we do? Yeah, some of the time we had to order it online and it was a pain in the butt. But on other instances, we learnt to deal without it. We learnt to create our projects with what was available. We learnt to go and source secondhand materials and what was available and use our problem-solving skills to make things happen. So the less you consume, the better off you're going to be when you one day move out, especially to a rural property. One of my favorite skills to learn, and definitely something that you don't need land to start right away, is composting. You can start bokashi bins, which can just sit under your sink and are really easy to maintain. You can upgrade to something a little larger that is outdoors in your garden and doesn't create much smell, especially if you maintain it. I have a few videos on my channel, and I know that there are plenty out there about composting and keeping a healthy compost pile, but composting is not only so self-sufficient and also sustainable, but it's a great way to get rid of all of those nasty smells coming out of your bins and reduce your waste at the end of the week. If you're struggling to keep your bin from getting too full before bin day, the best thing you can do is start a compost pile. Maybe make it this weekend's job. Start a compost pile and start taking your food scraps outside, adding a bit of grass clippings or leaves, especially at the moment there's plenty of leaves around, and you're only going to be preventing bushfires over the summertime, so it's a win-win-win. The thing with homesteading is once you do get to your homestead, or once you realize that you're a homesteader right now, you realize that it's a lot more about food and creating things than it is about the animals and the land. At least for us it is. We find that one of the best skills that we could have learned early on to prepare us for our homestead was mastering bases and sauces. And what I mean by that is we absolutely love city food. We are foodies from Melbourne and we love flavour. But we knew that when we would move to the country, these types of foods would not be as accessible, and even if they were never quite as good for our picky minds. So we learnt to make things instead. We learnt to make curry bases, we learnt to make basic bolognese, we learnt how to make green sauces, tahini sauces, hummus. All of these base sauces that, similar to fermented food, add so much flavour to your food, and it's actually really easy to make. We also started making condiments like Worcestershire sauce, barbecue sauce, tomato sauce, which are not only fun to make and a great project to do, but they're also so much more flavourful and so much more nutritious than the store-bought things. You actually know the ingredients going into it, which makes a huge impact on your want to actually eat it and feel good afterwards. Now, you don't have to be growing your own vegetables in order to create some of these ferments and base sauces. You can just visit a local farmer's market or an organic fruit and vegetable shop and buy the things that you aren't growing. Even people growing gardens are visiting these places and buying the things that they can't grow. For the last 4 years, I've been trying to grow eggplant with absolutely no success. Does that mean I didn't eat eggplant for 4 years? Hell no, I went and bought it. So do the same. You don't have to grow everything. The next skill is kind of a fun one and in a way brings you back to your childhood, and that's to rediscover your own creativity. A lot of the time, homesteading can have its dull days or its quiet days or its rainy days. And on those days, even though you want to go out and tend to gardens or animals or do all of the projects that you have in mind, you are forced inside or forced to rest. And having that creative project to go and work on is so satisfying. Things like playing music, drawing, writing, photography, videography, these are all skills that you can practice and learn and improve in. Right now in our tiny home, especially on the coldest and wettest of days, it's been such a luxury having so many other creative projects to visit and to do and discover once again, because sometimes you forget them. I have also noticed that our creative projects can become an income for us. They can become an income in the way that they allow us not to spend money on things. A lot of our cute little touches and decor around the house are made from macrame by me because they're things that we need and I didn't want to spend money on. So I taught myself how to make them. Our photography and videography has led us to build a community on YouTube and find like-minded people that make sure that we don't feel alone in the times when we are just heads down getting the projects done. There's a lot of people that say homesteading can be quite lonely, and so your creativity can really connect you with others that are also doing similar things. I've just realized that at least 4 of the skills that I'm talking about today are to do with food, and I think food is just the gateway to homesteading. They say chickens are, but no, I think it's cooking. If you learn how to cook well, you are easily going to start growing your own food and raising your own animals. So the next skill that I'm going to talk about is using every part of an animal. The easiest animal to start with is a chicken. There's things that you can make with every single part, including the organs that can be a bit scary, and even the feet can be so powerful and full of collagen for your soups, and you don't even have to tell anyone that you've put feet into your soup. That sounds weird. Once you're ready to upgrade to an animal that can be a little bit more challenging, you can then start using all the parts of a whole lamb or a pig or a cow, and you're actually going to save yourself a lot of money buying these animals in bulk and buying the whole animal butchered up as opposed to just certain parts of it. This is something we did well before our homestead in the suburbs because we were saving money, and over time we just learnt that some of the more unusual cuts were definitely our favorites. The trick is kind of to slow cook anything that you're not sure of. The cuts that may not be the easiest to cook or the most familiar are most likely cuts made to slow cook. So get yourself a pressure cooker if you're limited on time, or just use a pot on the stove and cook it low and slow with plenty of flavor, plenty of those base sauces we talked about earlier, and make something incredibly delicious for you and your family. And my final skill kind of goes along with the one I just talked about, but it's to use alternative cooking methods. There are so many different ways to cook your food. You can even eat it raw some of the time if you know what you're doing. You can cook with acid, you can cook with fire, you can cook on the stovetop, in the oven, you can cook in an air fryer nowadays. There are so many ways to cook your food, and the more different types that you try, the more skills you'll discover, but the more flavors you'll unlock in your cooking as well. There is nothing more enjoyable than cooking on a fire, especially. A lot of us who want to homestead have the desire to do it off-grid or as self-sufficiently as we can, and this might mean that you don't have access to everything. Right now in our bus, I don't have access to an oven like I would normally, and this has limited so much of what I normally cook, but it's allowed me to be creative with other things. It's allowed me to experiment with recipes that I never would have, and even try things like stovetop bread and cooking more things on the barbecue, or even cooking potatoes in a completely different way to still achieve a similar texture or results. So if you're one day going to be limited, you're definitely going to thank yourself that you learnt the skill of cooking in different ways. Seems so simple, I know, but it's such a huge thing. And with that, I hope you enjoyed the 10 skills that you can be practicing right now so that you can be a homesteader or a homemaker, and also to lead you one day to having your own land and animals if that's what you desire. Next time that we sit down to chat like this, I'm going to go over 10 mindsets and 10 shifts that you can make in your lifestyle if you are working towards being a homesteader, and hopefully these videos together empower you to just get out there and start growing your own food or cooking something good. See you guys.